In this first episode of Scenes, Sounds, Synapses, we take a closer look at the SMAPA Plus model for meaning construction and explore how it applies to a single, carefully chosen scene. Our focus is the haunting hanging tree sequence from The Hunger Games, a moment where music, imagery, and narrative converge. By breaking down the scene through the lens of SMAPA, we can reveal how musical elements impact our minds and bodies and shape our interpretations. Before we dive into these ideas, I want to highlight that Juan Chata explores them in greater depth with additional examples in his book Film Music: Cognition to Interpretation. His research does not just explore how sound and image interact, it also unpacks what happens inside our brains when we process these connections. If you have ever wondered why a musical cue can instantly transport you to a time, place, or emotional state, his book offers some eye-opening insights into the cognitive and perceptual machinery behind it. This is the SMAPA model, a schematic representation of the different ways we derive meaning from film music, ranging from the raw, sensory experience on one side to the more intellectual, analytical side on the other. These mechanisms do not exist in isolation. They are interconnected, working together to shape our interpretations, but for clarity, we will break them down one by one. In this scene, the ruins of District 12 set a somber atmosphere for Katniss Everdeen's song, The Hanging Tree. Amid the ashes, Pollux urges Katniss to sing. She starts singing a haunting tune her father taught her. Her voice blends with the murmur of a nearby creek, and a single mockingjay, the eponymous bird, echoes her singing. Realizing its significance, the film crew captures this moment. Meanwhile, in the control room, the leaders of the rebellion are tweaking her performance. They shift the lyrics from a song of despair into a rallying cry for hope and resistance. It is a brilliant move, taking something culturally significant and turning it into a tool for rebellion. The scene shifts, and we see the reactions of people across Panem. Katniss's song becomes a rallying cry against tyranny. In District 5, rebels are plotting to blow up a Capitol-controlled dam. During these moments, her sorrowful song contrasts sharply with the violence that is about to unfold. As the final verse of The Hanging Tree plays, the rebels trigger the explosion. The dam bursts, unleashing a flood that wipes everything in its path. This torrent symbolizes the unstoppable spirit of the rebels, sweeping away the Capitol's control. Katniss's song, now an anthem of hope, marks a turning point in the fight for freedom. Let's watch the scene.
Hey. Yeah, that's a mockingjay.
Well, now they'll never shut up.
You want me to sing? Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say, who murdered 3. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where a dead man called out for his love to flee? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where I told you to run so we'd both be free? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where a necklace of hope Side by
That
side,
line was originally Necklace of Rope.
strange
I had to
things
change to
that
Necklace of Hope.
stranger
Oh, you are a true wordsmith.
and me.
A little on the nose, but of course so is war.
Every district's seeing this.
Yes, but not the capital. I designed this signal defense system for them, but I can't find my way through it. Guess I did my job too well. At the time, I was just thinking of the science of it all. But
We met at midnight
we'll get through it.
in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say we're murder free. Strange things that happen here, stranger would it be? We met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree? They call out for your sons to feed. Strange things that happen here, stranger would it be? We met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Let's go back to the model for meaning construction. Now we will cover these mechanisms one by one. Empathy is not just a surface reaction, it is deeply wired into our brains. When we see someone's emotions or actions, our brain lights up in the same way as if we were feeling or doing the same thing. This is thanks to the mirror neuron system, which forms the biological backbone of our ability to empathize. About 30 years ago, scientists found a new kind of motor neurons in monkeys. These neurons fired both when the monkey performed an action and when the animal saw someone else doing that same action. These neurons, now called mirror neurons, were a game changer in understanding how we connect with others. Then, in 2002, researchers discovered audiovisual mirror neurons, which activate when monkeys either perform an action or hear the sound associated with it. Essentially, these neurons translate what we observe or hear into our motor system, bridging the gap between perception and action. Although mirror neurons were first found in monkeys, non-invasive techniques like fMRI and TMS have shown that humans have a similar system. It is this system that is firing when we engage with music in a film. In this model for musical empathy, I parse out our responses into three mechanisms: subvocalization, entrainment, and contagion. These are complementary mechanisms that illustrate the neural resonance music can evoke. Subvocalization is when we internally mimic vocal sounds like language, laughter, or screams. It is fascinating because when we do this, our brain uses the same pathways as if we were making those sounds. This process lets us experience the emotions tied to those sounds firsthand. Researchers have explored this idea a step further, suggesting that this mirroring process does not just happen with vocal sounds. It works with instrumental sounds too. Film composers know or intuit this and use it to their advantage, creating music that helps us internalize the emotions of the characters on screen. Now let's talk about entrainment. Entrainment is the process of syncing up with rhythmic stimuli, not simply a human habit, but an evolutionary trait that helps us navigate through our environment. Whether marching, dancing, or tapping to the beat, Entrainment makes us feel connected. Entrainment does not apply just to individuals. It is crucial for group dynamics too. It is what happens when playing in sync in a jam session or when marching together in a protest. It fosters social bonding and group cohesion. But entrainment is not just about predicting patterns, it is also about constructing meaning. In films, it helps create a shared experience, connecting us bodily and emotionally to the music and the characters. And we will delve deeper into entrainment when we get to affordances. Contagion is all about the spread of behaviors and emotions within a group. Contagion is rooted in our need for social interaction and cooperation. Think about how tempting it can be to follow a crowd's gaze, or how you cannot help but join in when everyone starts singing along or clapping at a concert. Like with entrainment, musically evoked contagion can bring us together, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. Film composers capitalize on this effect, often using large choirs or orchestras to generate a powerful collective sound. This technique immerses us in the film's world, making us feel as if we are part of the action, not just spectators, but participants in the unfolding drama. In the scene, Katniss's raw, emotional singing triggers a mirror neuron response, fostering empathy. We subvocalize her vocal gestures, allowing us to feel her sorrow and defiance.
Are you coming to the tree?
The music enhances this through entrainment and contagion. When the choir and large orchestra join, the unified sound amplifies our sense of shared struggle, turning her solo voice into a collective outcry that pulls us into the heart of the rebellion. Let's go back to the model of meaning construction, and let's proceed to the next mechanism. Schemas are mental patterns we form by repeated interactions with our environments and from perceiving regularities in those interactions. In turn, these concrete schemas help us make sense of abstract concepts. Take the container schema, for instance. It's based on our everyday experiences with containers, entering a building, opening a jar, or filling a cup. Once established via concrete embodied interactions with the environment, schemas allow us to understand abstract phenomena and articulate abstract ideas, like being in love, opening or closing an investigation, entering a new century. Film music taps into these deeply ingrained schemas, turning spatial, temporal, and kinesthetic experiences into auditory forms that resonate with what we see on screen. The container schema is foundational in conceptualizing sound design. For example, there's a difference between diegetic music located within the story world and which characters can hear, and non-diegetic music which exists outside the story world and is meant only for us, the audience. Because schemas are relatively stable, any disruption, like diegetic sound turning non-diegetic or vice versa, triggers a visceral response in us, creating a powerful narrative effect that highlights a specific moment or emotional shift in the film. In Katniss's scene, her singing starts as straightforward diegetic music, rooted in the film's world. But as the scene progresses, her voice is broadcast, it merges with instrumental underscoring, it synchronizes with marching, it is amplified by a choir, and eventually turns entirely into non-diegetic music. This subtle shift draws on the container schema, expanding her personal song into a symbol of collective struggle.
Are you coming to the tree? Are you coming to the tree? Wear a necklace of hope. Are you coming to the tree? And hope, our 40s loves to
Let's go back to the model of meaning construction and let's proceed to the next mechanism. A metaphor is an explicit or implicit comparison that is literally false. For example, my car is a lemon is a metaphor, as my car isn't literally a lemon. In contrast, my car is a Toyota is a categorization, not a metaphor. Lakoff and Johnson moved the study of metaphor beyond linguistics into perception and cognition. Now, metaphors are seen as conceptual and socio-cultural phenomena, which may involve different sensory modalities. For instance, this ad combines visual and linguistic elements to trigger a metaphorical process. Lakoff and Johnson began by grouping linguistic metaphors into broader categories called conceptual metaphors. For instance, the metaphors spirits are high, she is rising to power, and profits are soaring belong to the more is up conceptual metaphor. And then they drew a link between conceptual metaphors and image schemas. For example, a conceptual metaphor like more is up relies on the verticality and more broadly on the linearity schema, which we understand from concrete experiences by relying on a one-dimensional continuum, one that is not necessarily tied to a vertical orientation. And as you can see, once we have established this schema in our minds, we can apply it to increasingly abstract notions. Film music can establish metaphors or trigger metaphorical thinking. Traversing one-dimensional continua like pitch, volume, or timbral density, for example, also engages the linearity schema, prompting metaphorical mappings between the music and other cinematic elements, like the visuals or the emotional states of characters. In the scene, the conceptual metaphors in-group cohesion is timbral density and in-group cohesion is loudness emerge, both based on the linearity schema. The shift from Katniss's solo and soft voice to the collective and louder singing illustrates how personal defiance can grow into a unified rebellion. The visuals and sound design also mirror this, transitioning from small groups to large masses and shifting from a gentle creak to a roaring dam, encapsulating the progression from individual struggle to collective uprising.
Are you coming to the tree?
Let's go back to the model of meaning construction, and let's proceed to the next mechanism. Let's switch gears to the concept of affordances, as introduced by James Gibson. Affordances describe the potential actions our environment offers us. Our senses aren't just passive receivers of information. They actively detect and interpret opportunities for interaction. For example, when we look at a chair, we don't just see an object with a certain color or shape, we see something to sit on. Affordances combine perception and action into a unified process. Recognizing affordances means seeing how something can be used, like the kickability of a ball, the graspability of a mug, or the climbability of stairs. Affordances are not abstract properties, but are relative to the perceiver. For example, we recognize the affordance of support in surfaces by understanding our body's construction and capabilities. Despite stable properties of our environment and bodies, new affordances emerge based on our needs or intentions. That same chair might afford us sitting, but it could also afford us blocking a door, defending oneself, or reaching something high. Our interaction with objects is dynamic and context dependent, and so are these affordances. Now let's apply this to music. Through the lens of affordances, meter isn't just a property of the music itself. It's something we experience with our bodies. We don't just hear meter as organized beats. We experience it as a feature that enables interactions, whether that's dancing, marching, or relaxing to the music. For instance, duple meter 1-2-1-2 aligns well with symmetrical body movements related to locomotion and physical labor, such as lifting and lowering, pushing and pulling. Triple meter 1-2-3-1-2-3 defies our body's symmetrical nature, which makes it commonly associated with non-labor related activities, such as waltzes and lullabies. Asymmetric meters 1-2-3-4-5, 1-2-3-4-5 defy cyclic organization altogether, making them difficult to entrain to, posing a physical challenge for both performers and listeners. And in stark contrast to asymmetric meters, a perceptual absence of metrical structure evokes a sense of static timelessness. In a film, such metrical and by extension musical affordances interact with our embodied experiences, cognitive systems, and cultural contexts to shape how we interpret a scene. Duple meter, for instance, often depicts collective work or marching, suggesting forward motion and purpose. Triple meter, on the other hand, might evoke romance or dream states, something less tied to physical labor. Asymmetric meters heighten uncertainty, making them perfect for horror or suspense. And when there's a lack of metric pulse, it can evoke a sense of time stretching or even timelessness. In the scene, the duple meter subtly emerges as Katniss begins to sing, initially present as a veiled pulse.
Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say, who murdered 3.
As the scene unfolds, this duple meter becomes increasingly pronounced, both in the music and through the visuals, perfectly aligning with the evolving themes of rebellion and confrontation. On screen, the latent affordances of the duple meter are fully realized as the masses march in sync with the music, eventually bringing combat and defiance to life. This evolving meter draws us deeper into the heart of the rebellion, transforming us from observers into participants in the action. Because in the scene under discussion we only have duple meter, I here include an excerpt from a different scene with music featuring first a metric and then asymmetric meters. At first, the metric music makes the countdown seem endless, and then, at a cutthroat fast tempo, the septuple meter emerges and thwarts our tendencies to entrainment, infusing an unyielding and relentless feel, making us participants in the protagonist's frantic attempt to secure the resources they will need.
Let the 75th Hunger Games begin. May the odds be ever in your favor. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good thing we're allies, right?
Where did you get that?
Where do you think? Duck.
Let's go back to the model of meaning construction, and let's proceed to the next mechanism. Much has been discussed about leitmotifs, musical units tied to certain characters, settings, or ideas in a narrative, but little has been said about the cognitive processes leitmotifs rely on. Leitmotifs rely on auditory perception and memory to become powerful guides for interpretation. Establishing leitmotifs starts with auditory perception, as our brains and bodies actively respond to musical stimuli. At this stage, Gestalt principles play a key role in organizing and categorizing this new musical information. But perception alone isn't enough. For a musical figure to become a leitmotif, it has to be retained in memory, transitioning from short-term to long-term storage. This involves learned schemas like scales, rhythms, and familiar structures, and it relies on subvocal rehearsal via the phonological loop, the kind of mental and subvocal repetition that keeps a tune or sonic gesture stuck in your head. Ultimately, for a musical figure to become a leitmotif, it also needs to be consistently associated with something extra musical, a character, a place, an idea. This transition turns it from just a sound into a meaningful sign. And over time, this association becomes so strong that the leitmotif can evoke its counterpart even when heard in isolation. It is like a form of classical conditioning, a Pavlovian response, where the music instantly brings to mind the idea associated with it. Consider the Mockingjay in The Hunger Games. Originally a surveillance tool, the rebels repurposed it as a symbol of defiance and resistance. Throughout the series, its recurring call and its timbre becomes a leitmotif, This process begins with auditory perception and the recognition of its characteristic contour using Gestalt principles. We subconsciously draw on learned tonal schemas to identify its tonal profile, its minor mode flavor, the way it outlines tonic and dominant harmonies through arpeggiation, beginning on scale degree 1 and resolving on scale degree 5. Even if we're not versed in music theory and don't consciously think about these elements, our brains automatically and effortlessly process them, allowing us to connect with the music on a deep, intuitive level without any need for intellectual mediation. Finally, repetition and association throughout the film solidify this musical unit as a leitmotif corresponding to the rebellion that Cat puts in motion. In the pivotal scene we've been discussing, Pollux first whistles the leitmotif, adding a small inflection that leans toward the first note. Although at first hearing there seems to be no connection between the Mockingjay leitmotif and the melody of The Hanging Tree, there is a profound, organic relationship between them that can only result from compositional design. Both melodies share a similar contour or shape. Both exhibit a minor mode flavor. At this point in the film, both motifs begin with a subtle inflection towards scale degree 1 and resolve on 5, and both illustrate a harmonic movement from tonic to dominant.
Are you coming to the tree?
These parallels, though not consciously processed by most listeners, enhance the thematic unity of the soundtrack. The Mockingjays' call, with its clear similarities to the melody of The Hanging Tree, isn't just a sound or a motivic idea. It becomes a powerful auditory cue that spreads a message of resistance across the districts, weaving together the narrative threads of hope, rebellion, and defiance in a way that resonates with our subconscious conceptualization of the music. Let's go back to the model of meaning construction, and let's proceed to the next mechanism. Musical archetypes, called topics or topoi in music theoretical discourse, are units of meaning or signs internalized through societal exposure that evoke specific moods, settings, or cultural associations. Philip Tagg refers to musical archetypes as feels. In a film, these serve as recognizable signifiers, contributing to the narrative through cognitive and semiotic associations. These musical archetypes activate our memory and pattern recognition, allowing us to quickly connect musical gestures and styles with meanings based on prior experiences and cultural learning. For instance, by exploring musical archetypes through Anglo-American and continental semiotics, we can uncover their intricate layers and gain insights into their nature and function, revealing how they guide our interpretations. Very briefly, Pearson typology categorizes signs in terms of the relationship between representum and object. Icons are based on similarity or resemblance. Indexes are based on proximity, like a baton indicating the role of conductor. And symbols are based on convention, like a do not enter sign. From an Anglo-American perspective, musical archetypes are primarily symbols with meanings rooted in cultural conventions. For example, the 1930s German cabaret or the Methodist hymn signifies social context through established conventions. However, archetypes can also have an iconic component, like the distant bagpipe, emulating the sonic qualities via reverb and compression, or an indexical component, such as the funeral march linked to funerals. From a continental perspective, musical archetypes illustrate a clear signifier-signified relationship. In musical archetypes, the signifier is the material form of the musical sign, its contour, meter, timbre, and so on, while the signified is the mental concept associated with it, like a genre, place, or time. In film music, for instance, the sound of a theremin suggests the camp science fiction genre. A bandoneon indicates Argentina as a setting, and cowbells connote Christmas time. This signification isn't static. Musical archetypes exhibit a chain of signification moving from denotation to connotation, where surface features denote a certain archetype, which in turn connotes deeper sociocultural meanings, like a minor mode and slow tempo denoting a funeral march, which in turn connotes death, mourning, cemeteries. Let's apply this to The Hanging Tree. This song's style, structure, and delivery suggest the blues, country, folk, and anthem archetypes, each contributing layers of meaning to the film's thematic depth. The blues scale in the melody brings echoes of the blues genre, reflecting themes of sorrow, longing, and the fight against injustice. The slight twang in Katniss's voice hints at country music, a genre often linked to hardship and resilience. The strophic form, the repeated verses, evokes folk music, emphasizing the communal nature of the struggle. And the anthem-like quality of the song, via its many parameters, transforms it into a powerful symbol of collective identity and defiance, uniting the districts in their fight against the capital. Let's go back to the model of meaning construction, and let's proceed to the next mechanism. Our minds are wired to creatively blend disparate concepts into new meanings. Conceptual blending, a key theory in cognitive semiotics, captures this dynamic process. The theory works through a model that uses transient mental spaces. Input spaces gather details from various stimuli. A generic space synthesizes these details into an abstract form, and a blended space superimposes data from the input spaces onto the abstract thought, generating new meanings. In the context of a film, this model accommodates projections from multiple input spaces: music, visuals, dialogue, narrative, sound design, etc. Conceptual blending reveals how we, as the audience, merge these separate domains, integrating musical cues with visual narratives and cultural contexts to generate nuanced and subjective interpretations of a scene. But here's the thing. Our personal associations, experiences, and cultural backgrounds shape which elements in these input spaces stand out, leading to diverse interpretations. This variability highlights the interactive dynamics between individual cognition and a film's web of visual and auditory signs, underscoring the richness of our engagement with cinema. We're not just passive receivers of a film's message. We're active participants, bringing our own personal associations and interpretive lenses to the cinematic experience. In my reading of this pivotal scene, particular elements from various input spaces emerge as salient. These elements converge into three overarching ideas in the generic space: tragic heroism, collective identity construction, and adaptive transformation. Together, these ideas integrate input spaces, directly leading to new meanings in the blended space. Tragic heroism links components that emphasize themes of sacrifice, courage, and the noble struggle against overwhelming odds. Katniss's raw delivery of The Hanging Tree and its haunting lyrics create a poignant moment that resonates with the tragic hero archetype. The song's blues, country, folk, and anthem archetypes evoke cultural memories of struggle and defiance, amplified by the visuals of District 5's rebels poised for sacrificial acts. This underscores the high stakes of standing against tyranny. Collective identity construction links elements that illustrate the shift from personal pain to collective resistance. Pollux, a mute character symbolizing the silenced districts, pleads for Katniss to sing. Initially a personal lament, her voice swells into a communal anthem, transforming individual grief into collective defiance. This shift parallels the diegetic to non-diegetic transition in the music, symbolizing the awakening of a suppressed populace. The growing volume and the increasing markedness of the duple meter mirror the rebellion's momentum, from a few rebels to waves of people marching in step. Visually, this transformation is echoed by the journey from a small creek to the dam's explosive burst, symbolizing how individual actions can catalyze powerful collective movements. Adaptive transformation integrates components that suggest altering existing elements to fit new contexts, particularly in repurposing artifacts from tools of control into symbols of rebellion. Remarkably, the Mockingjay's call, a leitmotif that resonates throughout the series as a powerful symbol of hope, has been adapted and subtly embedded within the melody of the hanging tree itself, transforming it to resonate across Panem in leading the rebellion. Similarly, the lyrics shift from Necklace of Rope to Necklace of Hope reflects a strategic manipulation by rebellion leaders, turning despair into resistance and repurposing an emblematic song into a propaganda tool. This narrative construction is a profound act of reclamation, mirroring the broader theme of survival and resistance during the Hunger Games. Ultimately, drawing from my personal associations and the projections from various input spaces, my interpretation of the scene takes shape within the blended space. The hanging tree evolves from a personal lament into the collective voice of defiance, casting Katniss and the district's people as tragic heroes who embrace rebellion despite the shadow of death. Now that we've explored all these mechanisms for meaning construction, let's watch the scene again, this time with a more informed perspective guiding our experience.
Hey. Yeah, that's a Mockingjay.
Well, now they'll never shut up.
You want me to sing? Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say, who murdered 3. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where dead man called out for his love to flee? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where I told you to run so we'd both be free? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where a necklace of hope side by side?
That line was originally Necklace of Rope. I had to change to Necklace of Hope.
Oh, you are a true wordsmith.
A little on the nose, but of course so is war.
Every district's seeing this.
Yes, but not the capital. I designed this signal defense system for them, but I can't find my way through it. Guess I did my job too well. At the time, I was just thinking of the science of it all. But we'll get through it.
Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say we murdered 3. Strange things did happen here, a stranger would it be? We met and lived right in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree? Death and fall, for his love to flee. Strange things that happen here, a stranger would it be? We met and lived right in the hanging tree.
This cognitive semiotic investigation reveals that film scores function not merely as an auditory backdrop, but as an integral part of the film's semiotic fabric. They form a network of signs that interact with the visuals and narrative, enhancing our emotional and cognitive engagement with the film. This approach also highlights the potential for interdisciplinary research to deepen our understanding of cinematic expression. By bringing together insights from cognitive science, semiotics, and film studies, we can gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of how film music works its magic.